Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 95, The Nanny and the Hunk Producer. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. For once, Maxwell bests his arch nemesis, Andrew Lloyd Webber. Maxwell not only gets more Tony nominations, but he also receives more Tony Awards for his new show, The Widower, which tells the beautiful love story of a man who loses the love of his life and vows never to remarry. As a result, the show is now booked through 1999. However, not all of the press is good press. A tabloid prints a story about how Maxwell and Fran have been involved in a romantic relationship dating back to before Sarah died, including an allegation that Maxwell cheated on his honeymoon. Even more unfortunate, Maxwell and Fran learn about the news story through Maggie, who believes it to be true. Fran uses Gracie to get through to Maggie, who believed the story because she finally understood why Maxwell would hire a woman off a resume written in lipstick who remained their nanny, even though two of the children could drive. As Maggie told Fran, it's so obvious that Dad is in love with you. Well, all is forgiven from Fran's perspective. After the tabloid publishes a second story about Fran and Maxwell, they go to confront the author, who promises never to write another word about either one of them ever again. Not because of his newfound decency, but because that issue was the worst-selling issue in 5 years. Fran and Maxwell are, to quote the author, Dullsville. Maxwell takes that as a challenge and passionately kisses Fran, who keeps the kiss going even after the author left. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right, would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, so we open up in the kitchen. Sylvia and Fran are at the kitchen table, and while eating KFC, Sylvia is reading an advertisement. Miracle soap washes away fat. Shower and shed pounds at the same time. And of course, Fran's like, Sylvie is delighted by the idea. Fran says, "Oh, so you can use Dove to get rid of the Dove bar."
Mm-hmm.
And then Maxwell comes in and he kind of announces, "What's better than being nominated for a Tony?" And Sylvia says, "Your face on my grandchild?"
Correct.
And he's like, "No, really, and he announces that he was nominated for 5 Tonys. And Fran gets up, goes to him excitedly, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, I'm so," and then she kind of pauses. "Am I coming too?" And he's like, "Of course." And then so she's like, "Happy for you," and hugs him. And anyway, we find out, it's for the show The Widower. As you mentioned in your summary, The Widower is about a widower. Again, it parallels a lot of The Nanny, except in this scenario, the widower never gives in. He stays unmarried till the very end. And and Fran, of course, they talk about there's
well, so Sylvia says,
yeah, it sounds very poignant.
correct.
She's has very she's making a pointed comment, right?
Wait,
And
what did she say after that?
to Fran, "Do you need a house to fall on you?"
Correct.
Again, when we find out that the widower never remarries. And yeah, Fran acknowledges there's even a third act, gorgeous governor, beautiful governess, can't talk, governess,
Thank
who
you. Yeah.
doesn't even sway him. And oh, what happens after? And Fran doesn't know, because by that point she was sobbing too violently when she watched the show after, the governess was not able to win over the widower. Well, Niles comes in, and again, Maxwell's very excited about, these 5 nominations. And now he's asking where the children are. Niles says they're not coming down until they know how many, Andrew Lloyd Webber has. And Maxwell's like, 2. He has 2. I have 5. And he's like singing a little song.
Yeah, but
And is very
before
excited.
that,
So, mhm.
before that, Maxwell's like, he says, "Good Lord, they really think that I'm that childish." And then he goes into that little sing-songy 2. I got 5, he's got 2.
Yep. Yep. Because he is a bit childish, as we know.
Oh yeah.
And so all 3 children come down and are hugging and excited with him. Cece then comes into the kitchen. He's like, "Why are you in here hugging children? We got to get out there and turn it on for the judges." And then she kind of stops and contemplates to herself, "Now, what would I look really great in?" And Niles, of course, standing right next to her, says, "A sealed mausoleum." And Cece is not amused. Sylvia gets up. Again, there's still the kind of celebration with the kids and Maxwell in the background. Sylvia gets up, and it's too many nominations that scare me. I mean, can you imagine if you have 5 nominations and you don't win any? And of course, that brings the mood down immediately, and like the kids disperse, and like, she's a party pooper in this scenario. And so Fran kind of comments to Maxwell, "Next time you kvetched," is that how you say it?
Fetch, yeah.
"About my therapy bills, would you remember this moment?" Because Maxwell's kind of getting a taste of Sylvia in that moment. And that is the opening scene. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
So
Can you take us to the Tonys?
I would love to. So we're now at the Tonys, and the Maxwell and Fran and Cece, the kids, and Niles are sitting, in seats. And Brighton makes the comment, "Fran, don't look, but I think that's Liza coming down the row in front of us." And then he realizes that he, probably shouldn't have said that. Well, Fran whips out her camera and she's like, "Hello, Miss Minnelli, willkommen, bienvenue, welcome." And then she takes a picture. "Oh, I'm sorry, that was terrible." And then she does it again. "Oh, here we go, one more time. Okay, keep moving, honey. We can't see." And like Maxwell scolds her, "It's fine." And she's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm just out of control. Please take the camera from me." She hands it over. And then Maxwell's like, "Okay, this is it. If they start to shoot our row, I don't want anyone making any rabbit ears behind anyone else's head. Just behave yourselves." And Brian's like, "Well, when did I ever do that?" And Max was like, "Oh, I wasn't speaking to you." And then we find out it was Niles who's like, "Oh, one time at the Angela Lansbury roast, would you let go?" And so Fran comments to Maxwell, trying to reassure him, "Okay, Andrew Lloyd Webber won 2 awards. You've won 2 awards. He's not up for anything else. You're not going to hear his name mentioned again tonight." Well, guess what? She's wrong. We hear the announcer say, "Now to present the nominees for Best Play, Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber." And then we hear, a British voice saying the nominees are, and he goes through, a handful of them. And then he gets to, "And the widower, pardon me, I'm so sorry, and he like can't get the name Maxwell Sheffield out of his mouth. And so Maxwell shouts, and I think he also like sits up a little bit or stands up.
Oh, he like stands up kind of.
Yeah, he like stands up. "Maxwell Sheffield, you little twit." And then the British voice says, "And the word goes to the widower, Maxwell Sheffield, producer." And so Maxwell gets up, Fran and Cece get up, and Fran goes to congratulate him, throws her arms around him and gives him a big kiss on the lips. And Cece's like, "Excuse me, I co-produced. I raised money." And Fran's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," then kisses her on the lips too. And Cece pushes her away. "Nanny, fine, get off me."
Yeah. Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to the office?
Yes. So we're in Maxwell's office, and Niles is looking at a tray, and then he sighs and puts it down kind of a little more forcefully, than necessary. Maxwell's over by the little couch with Fran. Fran's doing his makeup, by the way. But Maxwell says to Niles, "Oh, could you, please, could you at least smile so that the reporters don't think my butler is a criminal on work furlough?" And Niles explains that, like, oh, you have to kind of think of it from my perspective. Like, you get to say, hello, Senator, and all that kind of stuff. And I get to say, and he holds up one of the toothpicks, this is cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Fran is like I said, she puts on some like mascara, and she also says go like this, and she does kind of like the fish kissy face thing to do
Mm-hmm. She has
some
Maxwell
blush,
pucker.
I think. Yeah, and um but anyway, so Maxwell's just like to Niles, like, I'm already I'm paying you overtime, like what else do you want? And then Niles goes on and he talks about how, after Maxwell won, they went behind the stage and took like family photos, and Niles had to stand behind Maxwell and pull his jacket to make a V shape.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Fran's like, crinkle your forehead. And this point, like Maxwell's had enough with Fran, like doing whatever she's doing on his face. And it again makes some type of comment, like, don't you trust me? Um, and then also makes a comment about how like Maxwell has a whole pasty Hugh Grant in Miami.
I
Did
need
you
a
get the whole line?
Yeah,
Because
so
there
she
was,
says that he looks a little pacey. He has the whole Hugh Grant, I need a week in Miami look.
gotcha. And then Cece, meanwhile, walks into the office and says to Fran, I need someone at your mother's house. Fran's like, who? Cece's like, you.
I need something at your mother's house.
Oh, okay. Who?
What?
Well, I thought she said someone, and then it was who, but whatever.
He said, I need
Basically,
something at your
Cece's
mother's house. What? You.
okay. And she kind of throws her out. But Cece explains to Maxwell, it's so great. They're booked through 1999. That grieving widower speech of yours was a gold mine. And Max was like, Cece, I was speaking from the heart. That time when, and Cece's like, yeah, okay. Because again, classic Cece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she, meanwhile, had been like looking on Maxwell's shelf and found some type of like container. And
Mm-hmm.
she refers to Niles as, hey, handy wipe.
Yep.
Come here, clean. Why don't you get some ashes from the fireplace, put it in here. We'll slap it on your desk, as she's talking to Maxwell, and say it's Sarah, always near you. And Maxwell's like offended, as I think anybody would be. And he's like,
Yeah.
Cece, I will not pass off Duraflame residue as the mother of my children.
Mm-hmm.
And Cece's like, meanwhile, Cece's kind of distracted, looks closely at Maxwell. Maxwell, I never noticed how long and luxurious your lashes are.
Right.
Um, and Maxwell's just like, just send in the reporters. Like, he's done. Um, and Niles, meanwhile, kind of goes up to Maxwell and comments that he should really switch to waterproof because I guess the mascara is kind of smudged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, a flurry of reporters come into the office. They're asking all these questions about it. And one of the reporters even makes a comment asking, like, have you really not been with anybody? A guy like you with those lashes?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing to note is that while the reporters were coming in, Fran snuck back into the room and she's at the
Correct.
back. And so while these reporters are shouting out various questions, Fran tries to change her voice and like, so are you really have no plans to remarry? And and Maxwell starts to answer by saying, well, if the right woman comes along, Miss Fine, he realizes
Mm-hmm.
her. Cece steps in, trying to be like, ignore her. She is just the nanny. But Fran's kind of drawn attention, and the reporter wants a photo, and Fran's all for it. Like, she plops herself on the desk and, get me from the left, honey. She knows which side is her good side. And again, there's another comment. Is the Eva Perone comment from Cece or from Maxwell?
It's from Cece.
Yeah. So once again, Cece's trying to mitigate the situation and reminding Fran this is not, Eva Perone on her rainbow tour and stuff. And so again, Fran's kind of sent out, but then Cece immediately, because again, Cece's trying to say this is all about Maxwell, but then Cece hops onto the desk and also is posing for photos. Is there anything you'd like to discuss or add?
The only thing I want to add is that when Cece, says like, oh, ignore her, she's just the nanny. Her next comment is, any of you have children? Because we're letting her go.
Yes. Yep.
So, all right. So scene 4, we're in the living room, and Fran is, Niles is sitting on the chair, and he's clearly still dressed. He's in his like going out coat, and Fran is in a bathrobe, and she, says to him, would you just get undressed and go to bed already? And Niles is like, oh, but I could still get a call. And Fran's like, look, it's past midnight. The cast party's over. He's not inviting you. And Niles is like, I don't know why not. I was the inspiration for the character of the butler. And Fran's like, he was 25 with a blonde pompadour and an impish grin. And Niles is like, well, so was I 600,000 Brillo pads ago. And then in walks Maxwell through the front door, and he sees Niles is all dressed up. And so he asks if Niles is going somewhere. And Niles is like, oh, I just thought I'd trot over to the cast party and clean up. And Max is like, oh, you can do that in the morning. And, Niles leaves, and it's now just Fran and Maxwell. And
Maxwell's kind of like, oh, stop that. You could do that in the morning.
Right. It's just, he's just totally oblivious.
Yeah.
But with Fran, he realizes that there might be a little issue. And so he asks her, you did understand that this party was for the cast and crew only, right? You weren't expecting to be invited, were you? And she's like, no. But as she says that, she whips open her bathrobe, and I think she like drops it, and we see that she's dressed for a night out.
Mm-hmm.
And then in walks Margaret through the front door, and Maxwell's like, Margaret, it's a little late for you, isn't it? And her response is like, how would I put this? Like what you imagine a stereotypical teenager would say. And she's like, I'm home, okay? So lay off me. You're the last person I have to answer to you. And she like starts going upstairs. She like runs up the stairs, and he's like, where did that come from? You get back down here, young lady. And she shouts, no, but we don't see her. And Maxwell says to Fran, she's not going to get away with speaking to me like that. Fran's like, wait, let her calm down a little. And he's like, what do you mean her calm down? What about me? And she's like, oh, you're just going to have to deal with it. Look, when I hit puberty, my mother was a size 6. When I hit 18, so did she. And Maxwell's like, what could make her leave the house and come back home with a completely different personality? The two of them now sat like down on the stairs. And she's like, oh, I don't even want to think about it. Do you read those pamphlets they sent home from the school? And he's like, what do you think? Alcohol? Sex? And she's like, not tonight. I'm too distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to Dr. Miller's office?
Yes. So Dr. Miller is back, and we're back in his office, and we come into the scene at a point where they're in the middle of a conversation, and Dr. Miller's explaining that, oh, that's just typical adolescent reaction. When someone's in the limelight, they kind of act out. Have you considered getting a trophy that says Butler of the Year? So, yes, contrary to expectations, they hadn't been talking about Maggie at that point. They had been talking about Niles.
Mm-hmm.
And both Fran and Maxwell are there, by the way, and they kind of act like concerned parents during this as well, which makes the twist even funnier. But at that point, Maggie does show up, and again, she still has a bad attitude, that kind of typical sullen teenager vibe. And like, I'm here, like, she sits down, and this is going to be a total waste of time. And Fran's trying to like reassure Maggie, get her to open up by saying, feel free to say anything you want to. Nobody's going to hold it against you. Just tell us. And then Maggie's like, okay, I hate him, and gestures towards Maxwell. And Fran's like telling Maxwell, oh, don't take it personally. But then Maggie's like, and I hate you too. And Fran immediately is like, open a window, I cannot breathe. And again, like, Maxwell's trying to explain to Maggie, like, if I've wronged you, I don't know how to make her right if I don't know what I did. And so like Maggie finally relents, and she like takes out a paper, like a newspaper, what we learned to be a tabloid. And she's like, here, I saw this, I saw everything. And in the title of it is The Nanny and the Hunk Producer. And Maggie's talking about how it's all in there, like how you cheated on mom on your honeymoon. Like basically the allegation, as you mentioned in your kind of summary, is that like Fran has been Maxwell's side piece for years. Again, going back to the honeymoon. And Maggie's like, there's even pictures to prove it. And, they could look at it. And then Fran at first is not as bothered until she realizes that it says she's 40 in it.
Oh, it doesn't say, this one doesn't say she's 40, but she says to Maggie, for this
to
be true. Go ahead.
Don't you know how old I'd need to be?
Right.
Yeah, I do. 40. Okay. And then and Fran's response is that, oh, she's doing drugs too, because like, why else would Maggie say that? So anyway, yes, this is where we find out that there's a tabloid article out there claiming that there's been this long torrid affair between Maxwell and Fran. And Maggie apparently believes it.
Correct.
Question, like, we can talk more about that later, but yeah, is there anything you'd like to add to the scene?
No.
Okay. Can you take us back to the kitchen?
Sure. So Fran comes in and she tells Maxwell that the good news is Brian and Gracie never even saw the story in the tabloids. The bad news is I didn't know that and I told them. But the paper's credibility was blown by the headline, "Neighbors Scream Eyesore as Barbara Eden Moves into Giant Bottle." And Maxwell's like looking at it and he's just like, I don't know where they got these photos from my honeymoon. I mean, who would want to hurt me like this for a few $1,000s? And like Niles is in the background, they both look at him and he's like, oh, good heavens. You got your finger caught in John Gielgud's fly. Trust me, if I needed money, I wouldn't have to make something up. And Fran looks at Maxwell like, what is he talking about? And Maxwell's like, he was King Lear, I was his dresser. And Fran's like, did I say a word? And Maxwell's like, I just want to hit something. Doesn't it drive you crazy, people reading this stuff and then believing it? And Fran's like, look, they're accusing me of having an affair with a married millionaire. In my old neighborhood, that's a career goal. All you have to do is worry about Maggie. What do you care about the rest of the world? Nobody but a mindless nutcase would buy into this junk. And right on cue, Sylvia enters through the side door. You were having an affair with Mr. Sheffield on his honeymoon, and you're still getting $6 an hour? Yeah. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nope.
All right, take us to Maggie's room.
Yeah, so Maggie's in her room and on her bed. Is this the first time we've been in Maggie's room?
I was just thinking that.
I don't
so.
think so.
I don't
Well,
think
because
so. I mean, we
because it's kind of similarly set up like Brighton's like orientation
mhm.
uh, wise. But I don't think we've been in Maggie's per se. But
I'm
regardless, we're there now. And
correct.
she's on the bed and there's a knock on the door. Oh, what? And again, Maggie's door's obviously like locked and stuff. And I've apparently been trying before, it's like going, go, what's Gracie's voice?
Mhm.
Um, you know, at the other end, and she wants to come in to talk to Maggie because she's like trying to deal with this all and all this stuff. So Maggie kind of reluctantly goes to the door and opens it, and Fran darts in, leaving Gracie behind in the hallway. She's like, I'm in. And Maggie is just like, I can't, like, well, and Gracie tries to like defend herself by saying like she can't even get a Happy Meal on her own. So she owns me. And
Mhm.
Maggie turns to Fran and is like, I can't believe you got like a little girl to like help you out. And Fran makes the comment like, oh, she's always used, but now Gracie's much bigger and less compelling than she
Mhm.
used to be.
Right.
And again, Maggie goes back to her bed, sits down there. Fran kind of follows, and again, it's like it's not true. Like, but basically, Maggie, like you said, finally understands why her father, hired someone whose resume was written in lipstick. And she goes on and says, and why you're still the nanny when like two of us can drive. And Fran's like, but it's not true. Like, why do you think, and Maggie says to Fran, prove it that it's not true. And Fran looks at the article, points out the picture, and she says, I'm wearing clinic bisque
Monique Ivory
base,
Bisque.
whatever, ivory bisque base. And that wasn't patented until 1987. Hot, and that still does not convince Maggie. So Fran kind of gets like more somber and she's like, I'm so hurt that you would think that I would do something like that. I don't think I can ever forgive you. And she's saying this not like loudly and dramatically, um, as she's wont to do in the past, but kind of again, more like serious. And and Maggie's like, well, what else am I supposed to believe? It's so obvious that dad is in love with you. And so, of course, Fran immediately kind of looks over her shoulder back um, at Maggie and she's like, I forgive. Because, of
Mhm.
course, she loves hearing that Maxwell obviously in love with her.
Correct.
Um, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
So I've been like Googling to see when else we see Maggie's bedroom. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think this was the first time, but the only other picture that's coming up is something later on. So
Mm-hmm.
perhaps this was, but like the
Mm-hmm.
orientation also is similar, you're right, to Brighton's room, but also similar to Gracie's room, which we did see in season 1. So
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because, again, this house makes no sense in terms of a layout.
correct. Correct. All right, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay. Would you like to take us to
The foyer.
think yes.
So Fran and Maggie come down the stairs and Maxwell's, by the table in the foyer. And Maggie says, Dad, I'm sorry. I believe you now. Fran explained everything about how you told her you loved her and then you took it back after, of course, saying she's the most beautiful woman in the world, that you can't live another day without her. She hugs him and like walks away. And Maxwell looks at Fran. And she's like, what? Did you want your daughter back or not? And in
Mm-hmm.
walks Cece. And she's like, Maxwell, this is dreadful. And he's like, oh no, Cece, it's all fine. The children understand it's a lie. Well, Margaret was upset and Cece's like, I don't give a rat's butt about them. Ticket sales came to a screeching halt because of this rag. And she like tosses a tabloid down on the table, and Maxwell reads, Broadway's grieving widower can't keep his pants on. And Fran looks at it and she's like, I look unbelievable in this shot. And Maxwell's like, this is too much. This guy has gone too far. Does this journalist, have any idea what he's doing to people's lives? I'm going to go right down there now. And Fran's like, oh, what are you going to do? Punch him out? Violence never solves anything. Besides, what do you care what the whole world thinks? Meanwhile, she's like flipping through. And then she sees 40-year-old Nanny. I want his blood. And they grab their coats and off they go. You have anything to add?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us to the tabloids?
Yes. So we see the man from earlier, the previous scene when the reporters were in the office. He was the one who was, wanting the pictures and everything. Maxwell and Fran storm in. You! How can you hurt someone like this? How can you destroy someone's reputation? And Fran kind of pulls Maxwell back and goes up herself. Yeah, 40?
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell continues, how did you come up with this garbage? And the reporter, the tabloid reporter, who I don't believe we ever get a name for, says, I do a lot of research. See that? And he like bites into his apple and turns it. And he says, apple bears amazing resemblance to late funny man Red Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell is like, do you know just how much pain you have caused me and my family? And the reporter's like, yes. Maxwell's like, don't you care about who you hurt? And the reporter's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, this is when Maxwell starts to threaten the reporter about, he's going to go see his lawyer. And the tabloid reporter does a really exaggerated kind of essentially, ooh, I'm so scared kind of thing. Oh yeah, that's the first time someone's going to come after me.
I've never been sued before, is what he
yeah.
said.
Yeah. And the reporter goes on to defend himself. He makes up only what an idiot would believe. And he holds out a tabloid as an example. And of course, immediately Fran hooks into it. John's getting a divorce. And
Right.
Maxwell takes it out, throws it on the ground, kind of gives her a side eye for that. And anyway, the reporter though promises he's never going to write about them again. And Fran's like, see, we appealed to his decency and it worked. But the reporter goes on to say, well, yeah, and it was the worst selling issue in 5 years. And again, that catches their attention. And the reporter keeps going, yeah, it laid there like a lox.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was buying it. And that gets Maxwell and Fran kind of indignant. You're saying nobody wanted to read about the hunk producer and the naughty nanny? And the reporters are like, yeah, we're just going to return to Princess Di. She's always, I don't know what the exact phrase he used for
sells
her.
Beautiful.
Yes. And Fran and Maxwell are very stuck on this news that their issues didn't sell well. And Fran's like, well, that's because you don't know how to advertise us or sell us. You should have appealed to a younger demographic. 40, that's what killed it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter, those no, you're done. You're Dullsville. And Maxwell at this point is like, you want to see her, do you want to see her, the steamy producer, get over here, naughty nanny? I think he says, do you want to see something steamy?
Yeah.
Get over here, naughty nanny. And he sweeps her into her arms, and they kiss again this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter's not interested, frankly. He
No.
just kind of like gets up, makes his way to the door. Maxwell, meanwhile, is kind of saying to Fran, "Is he watching?" And she's like, "Yeah." And of course, she's just very into the kiss, wants it to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter and everybody else leaves. The reporter turns off the light, and Maxwell comments on this. And Fran's like, "He's just developing the film." Because
Mm-hmm.
again, she's more invested in keeping the kissing going
Correct.
at this point. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Can you take us back to the doctor's office?
Yeah. So we are now in a session between Dr. Miller and Niles is explaining that they gave him this little trophy that says Butler of the Year. And he shows it to Dr. Miller. It's nice, isn't it? And he's like, Niles continues, "I know I should be happy, but I'm suffering from tremendous guilt." And Dr. Miller's like, "Well, where do you think that's coming from?" And Niles is like, "I never clean under anything. I always lie and say it's decaf because I don't feel like making a second pot. And during prom season, I drive the limo for extra cash." And Dr. Miller's like, "Well, maybe you weren't meant to be a butler." And Niles is like, "I know, I stink. I don't deserve to be his butler. He's so good to me. He's even paying for this session." And he's like starting to cry. And Dr. Miller offers him tissues and then says, "I think we're going to have to talk again about this." And he quietly picks up his phone to talk to his assistant, Dee Dee. Run a TRW on Maxwell Sheffield. Meanwhile, Niles is sitting on the couch and he's like fluffing the pillows.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope. And then the last kind of credit scene is just a blooper reel for this
Correct.
episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the episode.
Yeah. So I get the sense there are things you'd like to talk about before we jump into our shtick.
Yes, because why on earth would Maggie believe that?
I mean, it sort of made a little bit of sense once you hear her explanation. It finally makes sense why Dad would hire someone off a resume written in lipstick.
Mm-hmm.
Like why you're still here, even though two of us can drive.
Mm-hmm. But also, like, again, it doesn't make sense at the same point. Because again, there would be an age discrepancy because even though, Fran is not 29, gasp, she's also not 40.
So can I interject something?
What?
Fun fact, according to our friends at IMDb, Fran Drescher was 40 at the time they filmed that episode.
Okay. But the character Fran wasn't, right?
Correct. Fran Fine is forever 29. Almost forever 29.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, like, but the other point being, like, Fran makes a point, though, that means, like, Maggie believing it means that Maggie believes that Fran would do something like that.
Correct.
And again, one would think if they really had this torrid affair since Maxwell's honeymoon and Sarah passes away, why wouldn't Nanny find moving right away? Instead they had a long list of like nannies prior to her.
Correct.
Well,
and obviously it's to keep up appearances to protect Maxwell's good name and prevent
then
others.
Why 4 years later are they still not? There's no ring on it.
The appropriate mourning period, as Cece pointed out, is what, a decade?
Is it? Did she say that?
She does say that. She might not have already said it, but at some point she does say that she thinks it's very inappropriate for Maxwell to be moving on. Isn't the appropriate mourning period a decade?
Yeah, that's not even in Victorian times that long. But yeah,
I mean, let's be fair. Cece just wants him to continuously be in mourning until he recognizes that she's available and would be perfect for him, even though
well,
obviously.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, still, I get what you're saying, but still, it's a tabloid.
Correct.
Like, it's not a prestigious, like, news outlet with more than a, photoshopped, one would assume, picture. So, I don't know.
So I mean, it wasn't, we learned that it wasn't actually, they weren't all photoshopped, right? Because, Maxwell says that I don't know where they got the pictures from my honeymoon. Yeah. Anyway, I take your point that it's so unreasonable that like she jumped to that conclusion. But at the same time, like, I guess my thought would be like, it makes sense that like the things that didn't work in like a normal person's mind, or like the things that don't make sense about the series, are that Fran was hired off of resume like that, and B, that she's still there. But on the other hand, Fran has been there for 4 years and the kids know her and love her. And so that part, I agree with you that it doesn't really make sense to believe that she was capable of doing that, So yeah. I don't know. I do think it's sort of funny that like this is the conclusion, like the fact that there was the ability of a tabloid writer to spin this story based off seeing, Fran at the Tonys and kissing Maxwell at the Tonys and then seeing her again at the household, and how he sort of glommed onto that, because it's so opposite of, the story of the widower, right? Where the widower, loses the love of his life and then vows never to remarry. And like Fran is, as we as we talked about, besides herself with the inability of the gorgeous governess in Act 3 to turn his head. So yeah. I think that pretty much sums this up. Do you have anything else you want to say on this, or?
No. Lovely listeners, do you have an opinion one way or the other, whether you think it's reasonable for Maggie to have believed the tabloid?
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to talk about before going to our shticks?
I don't believe so.
All right. So let's talk about some fashion, our favorite and not so favorite fashion. Was there anything that jumped out at you?
What jumped out at me was actually her hair choice at the Tonys.
Mm-hmm.
It was a short, like white blonde kind of wig, maybe even just like, I don't know, but it wasn't like the most flattering.
No, it
Like
was not.
I did not see a need for it.
I did not either. But did you notice she has like different hair in pretty much every scene of this episode?
Yeah, I was very curious. Like, I mean, this season, it seems especially, she tends to wear like numerous wigs. And I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't sure, like, what prompted that change this season from the previous seasons. Because we have had, some various hairstyles before, but for the most part, she usually had her classic hairstyle
Mm-hmm.
in the earlier seasons.
Right.
So I don't know.
I don't know what changed either, but especially in this episode, it felt very drastic. Like in the first scene, I think she has her normal hair, right?
Mhm.
And then at the Tonys, as you point out, she has that really short, frankly ugly white bobbed wig. And then, I think the next time we see her is when, she and Niles are disappointed they didn't get to go to the cast party, and she has, flat hair and it's like her normal brown. But then like when the reporters are there, she has a flat red wig.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, she goes back to her normal haircut, her normal hairstyle, and then something similar to it. It's all over the map.
It is.
What did you think
It
of the
is.
dress she wore to the Tonys?
Can you remind me again what it looked like?
It sort of went with the wig, and I think that's probably what she was doing.
It was it kind of 60s-esque?
Yeah, it was
Like
a
go-go, a
yeah, it was like
go-go
a
kind of
go-go
dress?
length. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't have thought that would be the choice for going to the Tonys.
No, I agree, especially considering Maxwell and Niles and Brighton seem to be in tuxes.
Yeah.
What
Yep.
did you think of what Cece wore to the Tonys?
Again, can you remind me a
Of
bit?
course. So it's like a halter top, it's brown, I think it's floor length, and she has this like very wide wrap that she wears around her that's also brown, and there's like a slight pattern. To me it's much more, award ceremony-y.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely not as out of place as Fran's outfit in that scene.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Was there other fashion?
So did the dress that she had under her robe when she was anticipating being invited to the after party, have we seen that before? I feel like.
Yeah, it looks very familiar. It's sort of, I don't know if this is the same dress, but to me it's reminiscent of the dress she wore when Maxwell's brother came to visit and she was his welcome to New York ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
A black dress with an overlay. I mean, this is like a very standard dress for her. But also,
Well, because this one had the shiny, multicolored short dress. Like, yeah, it just looked very familiar.
yeah. I will also point out that Fran's fashion is all over the map weather-wise in this episode. So like obviously at the Tonys, and then to go, if she had been able to go to the cast party, she was wearing a spaghetti or tank top type dress that was very short. Yet later in the episode and earlier in the episode, she's wearing long sleeves. So like when she talks to the kids about the tabloid story, she's wearing her standard black turtleneck over a dress with black tights.
Yep.
Which to me is significantly warmer than the spaghetti strap tank top dresses she was wearing earlier.
Yep, I agree. So yeah, was there any other fashion you wanted to discuss?
I kind of liked what Fran wore in the first scene. It was a black jacket. I think there's probably a matching skirt, but we don't really see too much of it. And it had like an orange border along the collar and like down the front. And I thought that was very classic. All right, I'm out.
Okay. Shall we jump into notable New Yorkers?
Absolutely.
So, I didn't think there was necessarily a specific reference in the title because that seems like a common kind of form of titling things. I didn't know though if you thought there was anything.
I did not.
Okay. So we have two different types of Dove.
Yep.
There's the Dove soap.
Yep.
Which is soap.
Yep.
And then the Dove bar.
Correct, which is the ice cream bars we've talked about multiple times now.
Okay, so the big one, the Tonys.
Tony Awards, those are awards for Broadway excellence.
Now, the widower, I assume, does not actually exist since it is very much on the nose regarding plot to the nanny.
Correct.
But we have yet another reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Correct.
The umpteenth reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber.
If
Although
only.
now it makes me think that the past couple of episodes we haven't heard as many references to him, nor to Barbara Streisand.
Oh, don't worry. More are coming.
I'm sure. It's just I guess we had a little bit of a lull with that.
Correct.
So, Liza Minnelli.
An American actress, choreographer, dancer, and singer known for her stage presence and singing voice. She's the daughter of Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Angela Lansbury.
An actress and singer whose career spanned over 80 years. She was known for her roles in Murder, She Wrote, Sweeney Todd, Mame, and Beauty and the Beast. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. You did skip one in the first scene.
Which one?
Sylvia asks Fran, what do you need a house to fall on you?
Yeah.
Reference to the Wizard of Oz.
Yes, which again, Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli's mother, was in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So then we also, I didn't know if you mentioned or wrote down work furlough to explain.
I did not.
I mean, it's self-explanatory. Right. It's when, criminals get to leave the jail on furlough means they're outside of jail, but they're still, in trouble. They're not free. Then we have Hugh Grant.
An English actor who started as a romantic leading man and known for appearing in things such as Sense and Sensibility, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and Bridget Jones's Diary. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah, Duraflame. Fire logs. That's in quotes. That, and I quote, burn 80% cleaner than a typical wood fire. And that's according to our friends at Duraflame.com. I was just going to say that in the scene for the Tonys, the Andrew Lloyd Webber goes through the list of the other nominees. They're all fake.
Okay, gotcha. I kind of figured because none of them, even though I've never gotten to see a show on Broadway, I've seen some musicals and none of those names sounded at all familiar.
Well, I wasn't sure, so I looked, and they all seemed fake. So
no, good. Good job verifying that they were fake. Because even Maxwell Sheffield is fake. He's a fictional character.
He might be a fictional character, but he's so very, very real to us.
Mm-hmm. Is it Eva or Ava Perón?
Ava Perón.
Okay. And the Rainbow Tour.
So Eva Perón is was the first lady of Argentina. A fictional account of her life is told through the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, Evita. One of the songs on Evita is actually called Rainbow Tour. And that was actually the name of her tour, where she visited France, Italy, Spain, and Switzerland. And she was trying to boost goodwill between Argentina and Europe. And actually her tour was called Rainbow Tour because she was nicknamed the Rainbow of Argentina. And that's according to our friends at courtald.ac.uk.
Mm-hmm. Did you put Brillo pads down or no?
I did not, but I did have Handy Wipe.
Okay.
And I quote, America's #1 reusable money-saving cleaning cloth. That's according to our friends at handywipes.com.
Okay.
I actually did put Brillo pads. Sorry, it was later on my list. Those are steel wool soap pads. And that's according to our friends at Brillo.com.
Barbara Eden?
Yeah, so Barbara Eden was the star of the television show I Dream of Jeannie, which aired from 1965 to 1970. And the other part of that reference is the giant bottle. And that is a reference also to the same series because Jeannie was freed from her bottle by astronaut Tony Nelson. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. Was the John guy real?
Yeah, John Gielgud. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was an English actor whose career lasted over 80 years. He, with Laurence Olivier and Ralph Richardson, the three of them dominated the British stage for most of the 20th century. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Happy Meal.
A meal geared towards children that comes with a toy from McDonald's.
Yep. Did you put Clinique?
I did.
No?
It's a makeup brand. I tried looking for Clinique Ivory Bisque, but I could not find the reference to it coming into existence in 1987.
Okay. Did the actual Ivory Bisque exist, and it's just the fact the 1987 you couldn't find, or you couldn't find it at all?
I mean, there were things that came up, but I couldn't tell if it was a specific product that Fran was referencing.
Gotcha. Okay. Red Fox.
An American actor and comedian whose birth name was John Elroy Sanford. He was known as the King of Party Records, and that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
John.
We've talked about him before, JFK Jr.
And what's Princess Di?
Oh, Princess Di is a reference to Princess Diana, Princess of Wales.
What else did you have?
King Lear.
King Lear. Yeah.
Shakespearean tragedy about a king who, shall we say, goes mad. I think that's a fair summary.
As they tend to do, right?
Well, in tragedies especially.
Yes. Okay.
And then
any others? Okay. Yiddish Cop.
All right, we don't have that many this week. So the first one in the first scene is KFC is not kosher. It might be kosher style depending on what they're eating, but not kosher. It's not a kosher restaurant. The second one is kvetch. That basically means to complain, usually in an animated fashion. And then the last one I had was lox, which is a brined and possibly smoked salmon, which is usually eaten on bagels and with cream cheese.
Okay. So 90s nostalgia.
Old cars.
Indeed. And then also just like the whole tabloid being like a physical paper that Maggie saw at school or whatever. Again, these days it would just be all over the internet.
Agreed.
And most certainly Brighton and Gracie would have heard of it before Fran even had the chance to accidentally spill the beans.
Agreed.
So yeah.
Dr. Miller's old computer that we see in the background of his office every time.
Fran using a camera, an actual camera, to take pictures at the Tonys.
Maggie's, I think it's a CD player, but she has it on, I don't know if you noticed it on like one of her shelves. It looks like it's like, I don't know, 1.5 feet tall and like dark and wide. To me, it looked like a very large CD player. It might have also had like cassette tape capability. It was sort of unclear, but it looked dated to me.
The phone Dr. Miller uses to ask for the we always get such a gleam in his eyes when it comes to money.
Yes, he does. So I'm curious if you think this counts under 90s nostalgia, but Cece suggests to Maxwell or to Niles to go get some of the like ashes from the fireplace and stick them on Maxwell's desk and have Maxwell say, "Oh, it's Sarah, always with me, yada yada." Do you think that would fly today? Someone lying like that?
I didn't particularly. Oh, like in getting away with it or doing it in the first place?
Getting away with it.
Okay, because again, I don't know if we know if Sarah's actually cremated or not, because if she's not cremated, people could easily sleuth online, go back to Maggie's Facebook and see the picture, like of the grave site and all of that.
That was my point. I don't think I don't think someone would be able to get away with that type of lie, assuming she was
Mm-hmm.
not cremated.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Anything else?
The last one is me, and I don't know if this would count as 90s nostalgia, but it felt very 90s. The suggestion to get Niles a Butler of the Year trophy.
Yeah. A tiny one at that. It was really small.
It was, and he was like way too excited over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so yeah, anything else?
I'm out.
Okay. So we can actually add to the kiss count this week.
Mm-hmm.
So they kiss at the Tonys,
One.
and then they also kiss at the tabloid office.
How many did you count that as?
I just counted it as one personally, but I mean
Okay.
they do break apart a couple of times for him to ask, but it's like one continuous like instance, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's like one bout of making out.
Okay. I was going to give them more credit than that, so fine. But I'm willing to be more conservative in this
Okay.
instance.
So then where does that bring us up to?
22.
Woo!
It's taken us a very long time to get here.
Yes.
We're
Because
in
as a
episode
reminder, friends, this is for the entire running season, like series,
series.
not just this season.
Correct. This is episode 95.
Yes. um, we can also add to our after the thing category shtick, because Fran, well, via Maggie
I think it
brings up the
counts.
thing. Yeah, I do too. So that brings us up to,
11.
which is exactly half of 22. Huh.
Correct.
So yeah. How about some future fun, Debbie?
Sure. So I kind of already hinted at this. We are going to see the inside of Maggie's room again. In a later episode after Maggie goes to college, because that's how old she is, almost. Fran ends up, well, Maggie has a bit of a crush on her professor, and Maxwell wants Fran to go down to the university and make sure that the professor does not have feelings for Maggie, and et cetera, et cetera. Turns out that the professor falls for Fran, and Maggie gets very upset that Fran is going to date her professor because Maggie does have a crush on him. And so Fran and Maggie have this whole conversation in Maggie's room. And ultimately, Maggie relents and allows Fran to date the professor after Fran drops to her knees and basically is like, "Oh, please let me go out with him. I'm going to grow old and die waiting for your father."
Mm-hmm.
It's very convincing. Okay. So the next, additionally, I did mention that we're going to hear more about Andrew Lloyd Webber and Barbara Streisand. We will hear about Barbara Streisand just next week, I believe. There will be a reference to her. And we will hear about Andrew Lloyd Webber when he and Maxwell fight over the rights to Yetta's letters, which I think I mentioned last week. Finally, the next 4 episodes have a bit of a celebrity theme. So next week, Maggie is going to get a job working for an A-list movie star who just happened to go to high school with Fran. In 2 weeks, Fran is going to become a muse for a rock star. After that, Bette Midler is going to guest star as an auctioneer for, I think it's a charity auction. And then finally, in 4 weeks, Fran's going to move to LA to take over Heather Biblow's role on a daytime soap opera. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of grouped together interestingly.
Yeah. Must have been in the writer's room. Just really like that theme.
Yeah, I guess so. But then, in fairness, the last two episodes of the season do not have that. Although I guess the last one, episode 101, Celine Dion is a guest star. So,
Ooh.
something to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then on to episode ratings. Debbie, you get to go first this week.
I hate it when it's my turn to go first. I actually rather like this episode. I think it's funny. I like that Maxwell's career seems to be improving. I think the comic timing is great. I mean, like for example, Fran says only, a mindless nobody would believe this crap, and in walks Sylvia totally buying it. I like how funny it is that Fran and Maxwell are talking about Niles instead of Maggie at Dr. Miller's office. I like the funny gleam in Dr. Miller's eye when it comes to money, as you point out. But after talking to you, you're kind of right. Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that Maggie would jump to the conclusion that Fran, the person who is her best friend, who has helped her out of her shell, who's like helped her navigate growing up and things like that, that Fran would be capable of trying to break up her dad's marriage or interfering in her dad's marriage. I was originally going to give this episode a 5, but I'm instead giving it a 4.5 because I think you're right. It's a little unbelievable. How about you?
Okay. Wow. So the other thing I did fail to mention earlier is that to me, it doesn't feel like there's actual resolution to the problem, because part of the issue with the tabloid is not only the personal family stuff, but also the fact that it's impacting the sale for the show, despite the tabloid reporter saying that it was the worst selling, you know, issue in 5 years. So like at the end again, how Fran and Maxwell, before they get caught up in the whole lowest selling issue, it seems that they're just going to take it at the tabloid reporter's word that he's not going to write about them anymore. Maxwell previously threatened that he was going to go to his lawyer if, but but that seemed to kind of drop off, and the tabloid reporter did not offer any type of retraction or anything. He just said, I won't write about you in the future. And then to me, kind of manipulated them by distracting them with the notion that it was the worst selling. So I don't know. To me, that kind of like bugs me because again, I liked the kisses, but like there's still the problem of this false story is affecting your career, and there's absolutely no resolution.
That's an interesting point. Just 2 comments, and then I will actually let you give your rating. One,
Okay.
Maxwell does say to the guy, the tabloid writer, that he will go to his lawyers if the scurrilous attack doesn't stop. Well, it stops. So there is resolution in that way. And second, this is like pre-internet day. So like it sort of feels like once the news cycle blew over, it would be fine again.
Yeah. Again, I still feel like him promising not to do anything in the future doesn't undo the damage in the past if there's no retraction.
True.
So, I'm thinking. Again, I like the kissing.
Of course you do. We're clearly shipping Fran and Maxwell on this show.
Yeah, but I think we're this week. I think we flip-flopped. I'm gonna give it a 3.75.
Okay.
Because like the past couple of episodes, I think I've given them higher ratings than you did. So now we're flipping back here. So
correct. Yep. And actually, not gonna lie, that was sort of part of why I was planning to give this episode a 5, because I feel like the past few episodes have not been the best, and I'm like concerned that this season you might actually rate this series higher than me.
Yeah, it's just always so interesting because, like I've mentioned in previous episodes, sometimes too when watching an episode, it does kind of matter like what state of mind you're in or like how you're
Mhm.
feeling, how receptive you are to certain things, how much you're willing to suspend your disbelief and like
True.
immerse yourself in it. So, again, all of these ratings are subject to change and actually mean nothing in the long run.
Correct.
So yeah. But yeah, is there anything else you want to discuss before we wrap up?
No? Do you have anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 96, The Past Over Story.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.